That's what you do with the money, the extra millions we got. Right away, you wake up tomorrow morning and you say, we are going to change this.
An unusual act of pre-Christmas kindness, though, in Dunedin, and we'll end on this, free haircuts, courtesy of, well, we don't really know. Let's get the story from the source. Gaynor Maitland, owner of the barber shop in King Edward Street, Dunedin. Hello, Gaynor.
Hello.
What happened?
Well, I had a very nice customer come in yesterday morning, and she said she would like to pay for haircuts for people for the day, and she paid $800, and 45 people got free haircuts.
You didn't understand what she was on about at first when she came to pay the bill?
No, I wasn't sure what she was meaning, and she said that she'd had some kindness shown to her, and she'd had a little bit of fortune. She didn't win lotto or anything, but she wanted to pay it forward and hope that she could brighten people's days, and she certainly did that.
So how many people got free haircuts in the end, Gaynor?
45.
45?
Yes, they did, and they were overwhelmed, and they were quite shocked by it all, but they thought it was lovely, and even today people have come in and said how nice they thought it was of the lady, and it's made them think about doing things for other people. So, and that's what her intention was. So.
Wouldn't it be nice if all 45 of those people went out and did something generous for somebody else that really needed it?
Well, that's exactly what they were talking about, and a lot of them said that. So, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll follow up on that. So it was a really lovely gesture, and she's a lovely lady, and she didn't want any fuss or bother, and so, yeah.
So she melted away into the morning. Do you know who she is? I'm not asking you to tell us, but do you know who she is?
I know who she is. Yes,
right.
She's a customer.
She's a customer.
Yeah, she doesn't want to have anything, any recognition for that. It wasn't about that for her.
Were people, out of interest, were people surprised? Were
yeah.
Yep.
Did anybody turn down the free haircut and say, well, look, I can really afford this, so why don't you give it to somebody else tomorrow? Or...
Well, they did, and I said to them that maybe they could do something with that money for somebody else. So that's exactly what was going to happen, and he said he would do that. So and I'm sure he would, yeah.
Very reasonably priced cuts you've got going in Dunedin, Gaynor. I've just been trying to do the divide 800 by...
1875 or something, isn't it?
We're a barber shop, and we do lots of different variety of things, and good old Dunedin, you see.
But we're in for tomorrow. It's a lot cheaper than what I pay around here.
Yeah, so no, it was really good. It was lovely.
I suppose it buoyed, as well as pleasing your customers, it would have buoyed you and the staff. You would have been happier yesterday for that happening.
Well, we've never seen anything like it. I took over the business 3 years ago after working here for a long time, and the man that I worked for, he was here yesterday working too, and as he said, he's never seen anything like it. It was just lovely. It was really nice, and people were genuinely surprised, and it was a good feeling.
Gaynor, thank you so much. Gaynor Maitland telling us the tale of the woman who left $800 for the 45 free haircuts, the owner of the barber shop in King Edward Street. So there we are, Gary. We managed to end on a slightly more encouraging note.
That's fantastic. That's really good to hear.
How much is a haircut in Christchurch, just out of interest, Gary?
Well, I don't... it's getting personal. There's not a lot of hair left on my head, so I do get a reduced price.
Comment there, Jonathan.
You probably get an increased price for the extra skill required to pick through the remaining strands.
Yeah, that's probably right, Jonathan. You have a wonderful trip overseas, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely to be on the panel with you, chap.
Jonathan Krebs has been on with us today, and Gary McCormick. Our thanks to them both, and our thanks to you for listening. Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint. Well, not quite to Checkpoint, but we'll be on after Katrina in the news at 5 tonight. I have just spoken to James, the father of baby Elisaya, who disappeared from his home in Rotorua. A remarkable interview about waking up to find him gone. We're also talking tonight about emergency housing, and we have the extraordinary story of a caravan park in West Auckland that has received $500,000 of WINS money for emergency housing over the past 2 years. We're also returning to the story of Tuani Murray. She was on the program last night. $2,300 a week for her emergency accommodation. All of that and much more. We're in Gisborne looking at the aftermath of the power failure there, and a lot more on Checkpoint after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Homes at risk from a big bushfire at Matakana, north of Auckland, are being evacuated. 3 helicopters and 70 firefighters are battling the fire on Wright Road. Principal Rural Fire Officer Brian Cartel says all available appliances in the area are responding. Wright Road is closed and homes along the road and on Quiet Rise are being evacuated. Wright Road resident Rhonda Davies says a very strong wind is spreading the fire.
I can't really see much at the moment other than the helicopters, just kind of like flying over. But we have a fire truck sitting in the backyard, hooked up to a pond for water.
Rhonda Davies. An ambulance has also been called because of the large number of beehives in the area and the risk of allergic reaction if someone is stung. A West Auckland caravan park has been given nearly $500,000 of government money in 2 years through its residents' emergency housing grants. Western Park Village markets itself to beneficiaries with nowhere else to go and offers to help tenants get work and income to pay their bond and ongoing rent. Documents released to Checkpoint show in the 2 years to September, $472,000 was paid to residents for bond, advanced rent and housing support at the park. The figure doesn't include current rent. The park's owners have been approached for comment several times, and there'll be more on the story at Checkpoint after the news. The 4-year battle for the Syrian city of Aleppo is over. Russia says military action in the city has ceased and the Syrian military says it's taken control of all areas formerly held by the rebels. The BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
It is a huge victory, the most significant victory of the war for the Syrian government, for President Bashar al-Assad. But the future of Aleppo, a city divided, ripped, shredded. What we do know is the rebel fighters and their family will leave the battlefields of Aleppo, leave their dreams and their goals and their defiance behind and go to the city of Idlib in the west under opposition control, or go further north to fight another day.
Lise Doucette reporting from Aleppo. The Immigration Minister, Michael Woodhouse, is playing down findings that the exploitation of migrant workers is rife. More than 100 migrant workers interviewed for an Auckland University study told of working long hours and getting paid next to nothing. One of the recommendations made in a report based on the study is that the government should set up a new office to combat human trafficking and labour exploitation. But Mr Woodhouse says the study is only a small snapshot.
We have been aware of isolated incidents of migrant exploitation and the sorts of things that the report has highlighted. We've been acting on it, we've changed the law, we've beefed resources. This adds to our knowledge, but I don't think it's anything new.
The Immigration Minister, Michael Woodhouse. A third National Party minister is quitting Parliament. Craig Foss today followed Hekia Parata and Sam Lotuinga in announcing he won't seek re-election as an MP next year. The Labour leader Andrew Little seized on that when putting a question to the new Prime Minister this afternoon.
Given he now has 4 ambitious amigos, 3 resigning ministers, 2 brooding rivals, who's going to rescue Nick Smith from the pear tree?
Well, Mr Speaker, the basic difference is this. We have 59 members of Parliament, and that is a great deal more than that member has.
Bill English. Mr Little will announce a small reshuffle on Friday and Mr English will reveal his ministerial lineup on Sunday. Parliament has now adjourned for the year. A German tourist has been flown to hospital after being attacked by a seal in the Abel Tasman National Park. The 18-year-old was taking a swim with seals at Separation Point this afternoon when one of them repeatedly bit his legs. One of the paramedics who helped the man, Carl Babe, says he managed to crawl back onto rocks and raise the alarm.
I wouldn't say they're a regular occurrence, seal attacks or seal bites, but if you run across them, they are a wild animal. They're protective of their environment and their young ones, and they'll react if you get into their space.
Carl Babe says the man will be given antibiotics to help ward off infection. It's 5:04. In sport, defenders Kayla Cullen, Phoenix Karaka and Storm Purvis will miss the Silver Ferns Netball Quad Series in South Africa and England next month through injury. They've been left out of the 12-strong squad, which includes two newcomers in defender Kelly Jury and mid-quarter Sam Sinclair. Coach Janine Southby says while they had hoped to have Cullen back from injury, they're taking a cautious approach.
Kayla ended up having surgery on her foot. She's only just getting back into running now. She's been plagued by injuries this year, but at this point in time we're taking a very conservative approach with rehab and recovery.
Janine Southby says the trio should fit in time for the start of the ANZ Premiership in March. The New Zealand Breakers coach Paul Henare says the decision to sideline Corey Webster indefinitely has nothing to do with his assault charge. Webster appeared in court earlier this month on an assault charge, has been placed on injury leave so he can deal with ongoing foot, knee, hip and back injuries. Henare says the decision to stand him down is purely on the grounds of his physical health.
If it was, we would have made that decision 2 weeks ago when it happened, and obviously we went through a process and put a lot of thought into how we dealt with that. For now, we just feel that he's not at his best, and for our team to be successful, we need Corey Webster at his very best.
Paul Henare says the club is searching for an import to replace Webster. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, John Thorney takes on the reason for the festive season with this month's celebration of spiritual pop songs, with music from the band and a Kiwi Christmas carol with words by Peter Cape. Will Taumananui get a mention? And this week's overseas correspondent Tabu Batagira reports in from Uganda, which is coping with drought, famine and an influx of refugees from South Sudan. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather now through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato and Bay of Plenty. A few showers in Bay of Plenty until evening, otherwise mainly fine. However, showers in Waikato tomorrow afternoon and elsewhere during the evening. Waitomo to Wellington and Wairarapa, that also includes the central high country. Remaining showers clearing this afternoon. Rain tomorrow, briefly heavy with northwest gales in exposed places, clearing later. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, becoming fine this afternoon. Patchy rain developing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, cloudy periods, a few showers, mainly tomorrow morning, northwest gales in exposed places for a time. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain spreading north, followed by showers, some thundery tomorrow with hail and isolated squally thunderstorms from central Westland southwards. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some heavy tomorrow with hail and isolated squally thunderstorms in the south. Northwest gales in exposed places easing tonight. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with periods of rain tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. I've just rushed into the studio because there's been lots of late-breaking stuff today, including an interview with Elisaiah's dad, James, which we're going to bring you shortly. Elisaiah is the little boy who, of course, disappeared from his home in Rotorua. James describes waking up to find him gone. That is coming up. We'll also be live at the fires in Matakana, north of Auckland. More on those very soon, and more on Tuani Murray, whose emergency housing was costing up to $2,300 a week. We brought you that story last night. Checkpoint is looking at the cost of the housing shortage, and we're attempting to quantify the cost of emergency housing for people who can't get long-term accommodation. This is a difficult situation for WINZ because if they don't pay the cost of emergency housing, people end up in cars. But the cost of emergency housing does seem very high. That room we showed you last night, $2,300 a week. And tonight, a West Auckland caravan park that has received nearly $500,000 of government money in just 2 years through its Residents Emergency Housing Grant. And yes, you did hear that correctly. One caravan park, $500,000 of government money in just 2 years. Western Park Village markets itself as an affordable option for those with nowhere else to live and no money to front for bond. But it's pretty expensive. A caravan with a small bathroom costs $360 a week. Figures released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act reveal the park just isn't making money through rent. And in the 2 years to this September, residents paid the park owners $470,000 of money borrowed from work and income. Alex Ashton with this exclusive report.
They can do the filming from the road without, but like they are standing on the premises at the moment, and I want the charges to be laid right now. Can you send them police immediately, please.
The management at Auckland's Western Park Village weren't happy to see us when we first visited in September, after complaints from residents about unsatisfactory living conditions and withheld bond payments. Tonight, Checkpoint can reveal just how much money the park's receiving via Work and Income's loans to clients. In the 2 years leading up to September, $472,000 was paid to the park's residents in housing grants, which they then paid to the park. The residents then have to repay that money to WINS.
It's only like a 13, 15-foot caravan, leaking, broken windows that didn't open. There were cockroaches there when I moved in.
Any bathroom?
No, there was no bathroom. I had to use the public one up by the office.
This man lived at the park last year. $240 a week for a caravan with no bathroom or toilet.
Gang members roaming around, drug deals happening at your doorstep sort of thing. There were always arguments, domestic abuse arguments happening on a weekly basis.
Were there children around?
Yeah, there were quite a few families with kids around. Felt more like a concentration camp, if you will. I hate to use that phrase, but...
Checkpoint returned to Western Park on Monday.
Yeah, this is the only option that we have at the moment. Yeah.
So you'd be homeless, you think, if you weren't here?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Aronia is a tenant and has been on and off for a year. She and her son live in a cabin, paying $330 per week, including power and water. WINS cover the rent through a benefit redirection straight to the park.
There's a lot going on in there, but at the moment, yeah, we're okay. Yeah, it's a lot that happens in there, but...
What sort of stuff?
A lot of call-outs, like some with family or violence or whatever, people arguing, yeah, stuff like that, or some not so good people in there, but yeah.
But shortly after I spoke to Aronia, she came back out to say she wanted to say more positive things about the park, like the free meals they sometimes offer tenants and how nice the owners are. Another tenant I spoke to as they left wouldn't be recorded because she said the tenants were told not to speak to media, and during another interview, the park's manager left the office, walked past and said, "I sent her out for you." She was very complimentary of the park. Former tenants, however, were less so. The $470,000 figure doesn't include the money tenants pay in rent each week, much of which is covered by benefits. When that's factored in, Western Park Village's income is at a much higher rate.
Around 300 people living in that situation. I've heard $1 million plus per year. But I think there's a wait list for people to get in there.
Bernie Smith is the Chief Executive Officer of the Monte Cecilia Housing Trust, which has a staff member in the park for 25 hours each week. MSD helps pay for that through what's called community investment. In the 2015-16 financial year, it paid $45,000 to keep a social worker in Western Park. Bernie describes the accommodation as substandard, leaking huts and caravans. But he says unfortunately it is filling a gap.
My preference is that it be shut down tomorrow. But where do you place 300 people when there's a lot of housing stress right across Auckland where people are sleeping in cars, doubling up on couches in people's homes?
John Campbell is Chief Executive of Te Whānau o Waipareta Trust, based in West Auckland.
It has been a place of great difficulty because people in great difficulty have got nowhere else to go, and it's apart from sleeping rough on the street, the next step up.
Mr Tamahere says the park's owners have stumbled upon a gap in the market with a steady clientele, and he says unless something drastically changes, we'll see more Western parks.
Private bizzo focuses solely or significantly on that particular type of person that's, fallen into significant disrepair and unlikely to recover any time soon. You know what? New Zealand's going to have to wake up to the fact there's going to be a lot more of these doss-down camper van, camping ground facilities.
The documents released to Checkpoint also outline a meeting between Auckland's former Mayor Len Brown and Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett in August 2015. It turns out the park's been breaching its resource consent. Auckland Council's statement reads,
"Up until December 2015, the park was also being used for permanent accommodation, which it did not have a consent for. At that time, a temporary consent was granted for this activity, which expires in December 2017. This means that after December next year, long-term accommodation at this site will not be compliant."
We asked the council specifically how long Western Park's been in breach.
Auckland Council had investigated various complaints about Western Park Village over the years preceding the consent application, but had not proven they were operating outside the bounds of their planning permission until last year. In short, we are not aware exactly how long this activity took place, but understand it went on for some time.
Checkpoint has repeatedly sought comment from Western Park's owners, Daryl and Anne Heaven, including visiting the park twice and being asked to leave. We asked Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett for an interview. The park's right on the doorstep of her West Auckland electorate, and she has visited and criticised the park before. Her office declined to comment. Western Park Village is in the electorate of Labour's Phil Twyford, who's also their housing spokesman.
The revenue stream for this business is made up largely of the accommodation supplement and benefit payments and emergency and hardship grants. So, but look, I'm not someone who blames the proprietors of Western Park campground, caravan park, for this situation. The blame lies fairly and squarely with the government. They've allowed the housing crisis to put massive pressure, economic pressure on families who simply can't find affordable housing.
The Ministry of Social Development says it's aware the park isn't the most suitable accommodation for children and says it encourages clients to seek alternative accommodation. The Ministry also monitors all its clients who live on site. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
The issue, of course, is the housing shortage. People without a house to live in need emergency accommodation, or otherwise they do, as we have seen this year, end up in cars. Last night we visited Tuani Murray at the Allenby Park Hotel in Papatoetoe, where Wins had been paying $2,300 a week for the family to live in a pretty basic one-bedroom unit. After we did the interview, Tuani was told by the hotel that she, her partner and their son would need to leave by tomorrow. The hotel absolutely insists the money Wins was being charged was the market rate, and Tuani was asked to leave because they had another booking, not because she had spoken to us. She did, however, have a quote to stay another week, so we're a bit confused about this, but the hotel insists they had another booking. Tuani had a meeting with Wins this afternoon. They're in the process of relocating her to another motel in South Auckland at a cost of $1,700 a week, so that's $600 less. The family had been living in a Housing New Zealand property in Papakura for 10 years, but they left last year in fear following an incident where armed men turned up at their doorstep. They were not evicted. MSD have now apologised for stating they had been repeatedly evicted from properties. We first met Tuani and her family in May. Hello, I'm John.
Oh, Rasta.
How are you?
Oh, not too bad, mate.
Nice to meet you. Hello, I'm John.
Hi, Tuani.
Hi, Tuani. Nice to meet you. This is Claire.
Hi.
Our camera woman.
Hi.
Hello, what's your name?
Kyle.
Nice to meet you. How are you, bro?
Good.
Good. How come you're in a wheelchair? What's up?
I don't.
He was born like that, yeah. He's got a condition called cordial regression syndrome. Layman's terms, he didn't form properly in the womb, and just came out like that. Yeah, special.
So there's the three of you, right?
Yes, just the three of us. Yeah.
Okay. And what are you here like Nicole next door, being paid for by Wins?
Yes, we are.
And what are you paying to be here?
We currently paying work and income have paid $2,400 and something for us to be here for 2 weeks.
So $1,200 a week.
Yes, practically yes.
And so that's just under $200 a night, somewhere. Okay, just below that.
Yeah, that's right.
And when your emergency accommodation runs out here, where will you go?
Wouldn't have a clue.
So Tuani, her partner and their wheelchair-bound son were a priority for a Housing New Zealand house on the 18th of May. And the $1,200 cost per week was repayable to work and income. 3 weeks later, I went back to see them.
But yeah, this will be our 4th week in here.
And I have your papers here. So you have, when we first came and saw you, you were next door, weren't you? Yeah, right. Yeah. And you were paying how much a night for that room?
$165 a night.
And now I see you're paying $205 a night. So that's $2,870 for 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's correct.
And where's the money for that coming from?
Exactly, the government.
So Wins,
yeah.
You go, in fact, this is an application, right? You go and apply for an emergency housing allowance?
Yeah, an extension on to be housed here, for emergency housing.
And so you pay $205 a night for this room that you're in with your partner and your son who's in a wheelchair?
Yeah, Kaya.
And then you are accumulating debt with WINZ. How much do you owe now, do you know?
Roughly about 8,200 and something. Yeah, that's my debt to WINZ.
And have you started to repay it?
As of next week, I apparently am. $27 a week.
Okay, so is $27 a week being deducted from your benefit?
Yeah.
And how much do you get?
I get $243 a week.
So that's your weekly income. Is that the totality of your weekly income? Do you get anything else?
I get Working for Families tax credit, which is $92. And my son's, he gets a child disability allowance, which is $92 every fortnight.
So you're earning under $500 a week and you're paying $205 a night to stay here, which is money you're borrowing from WINZ.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the 9th of June. Tuani and her family were at that stage paying $1,435 per week to live at the same Takanini motel. And again, that money was repayable to WINZ. They were running up debt. After that, the family was one of 5 accepted as part of a housing initiative run by the Manurewa marae. The concept was that the family would live at the marae in a cabin until housing became available. And they did, but a house didn't eventuate. And after 12 weeks, the family moved back into a motel. In this case, in fact, the Allenby Park Hotel in Papatoetoe, which I visited yesterday. How much a week are you paying to be here?
We're paying $2,310 to stay in this motel, yeah.
A week?
A week, yep.
And for people listening, can you describe the place?
It is actually better than what we were in. It's the best one that has been able to accommodate our boy, Kaya. He's in the wheelchair, but it's still not somewhere we can call home.
So almost 7 months on, the trio are still living in a motel, hotel, lodge, now paying $2,300 per week. Now, this money is no longer recoverable by WINZ. The taxpayer is paying that $2,300 for a very basic one-bedroom unit. Tuani, can you show me the kitchen you get for $2,300 a week or over $300 a night? Yeah. This is it.
This is it. This is the oven, the fan, the aircon doesn't go, the fan doesn't go. We currently can't cook inside it, and we can only use a stovetop.
So the oven doesn't... So is the fan working?
Well, there's no buttons up here to turn it on, and only the stovetop works. The inside grill and the bake doesn't go. And we have a microwave.
And does the microwave work?
The microwave works, yes. But that's it, microwave, jug, sink, and an oven that doesn't work.
So that was Tuani Murray speaking to me yesterday. Now, this is obviously a difficult situation for WINZ. If they don't accommodate Tuani, her partner and their son, they'll be homeless. If they do, they end up paying up to $2,300 a week for what, if you are watching, you will have seen as pretty basic emergency accommodation. As we just reported, all of this has changed this afternoon because Tuani is going elsewhere, and that will be $600 cheaper, $1,700 a week. Again, WINZ will be paying for that. The issue is a lack of housing options, and that's not WINZ's department. Yesterday we went to Anne Tolley, Social Development Minister. Her office referred us to Paula Bennett, Minister for Social Housing. Paula Bennett wasn't available. Her office referred us to the Ministry of Social Housing. And from them we received a statement last night which we could attribute to Kay Reid, Associate Deputy Chief Executive. It said, and I quote, Ms Murray has been repeatedly evicted due to her behaviour, meaning she wasn't eligible for a Housing New Zealand property. Repeatedly evicted. Now, this is damaging to Ms Murray, and we were surprised as we'd researched her background thoroughly before we did any of these stories, and we weren't aware of any evictions. We asked for clarification. Today, we received a statement saying, and I quote, in the interest of providing you with comment at speed, it appears we have oversimplified our comments regarding the nature of Ms Murray's past tenancies, and we accept that the result was misleading. We apologise for that. So, an apology from the Ministry. The statement goes on to say, however, the family has been required to move from at least 2 properties. Once again, we don't have evidence of that, and nor did MSD provide specific details. What we believe happened is that the Murrays had a state house for the best part of a decade. They weren't evicted from it. But in late 2015, armed men came to the house asking for money. Tuani Murray says they had no idea who the men were or why they had picked their house, but it was terrifying. They left the house and never went back. In doing so, they left rental arrears of $340. We've seen the Tenancy Tribunal rulers specifying that amount. So $340 in rental arrears. This appears to have been the beginning of a dispute with Housing New Zealand. After it had been vacant for some weeks, Housing New Zealand contractors came to their house and found blood on the kitchen floor and a gun in the bedroom. The Murrays emphatically state they weren't theirs. Traces of methamphetamine were also found. Again, the Murrays deny using or selling methamphetamine. No one has ever faced charges over the gun or the methamphetamine, but Housing New Zealand suspended the Murrays from having access to their properties. It was then the Murrays ended up in emergency housing at many times more per week than the cost of the Housing New Zealand property they had lived in for a decade. And we still find ourselves now, the taxpayer paying, it was $2,300 a week. It will be from tomorrow $1,700 a week for their emergency housing. Winds say they are trying very, very hard to find some kind of permanent solution. It's 5:25. Coming up, the father of the baby who was taken from his home in Rotorua. Of course, that's sub judice now, so that's the allegation. But let's go to Matakana, north of Auckland. 4 houses have been evacuated and 6 more are on notice amid a large pine forest fire there. For those of you who don't know Matakana, it's a small lifestyle town, semi-rural town between Auckland and the great beaches of Omaha, Snells and all that kind of stuff. 3 helicopters and 70 firefighters are battling the fire on Wright Road. Our reporter Carla Penman is near the cordon. Hi Carla, what can you tell us?
Well, I was just driven through behind me, John, is Wrights Road. This end of it is cordoned off to the public. Only emergency services and residents are being allowed in. I was escorted by the fire service in, and it was about half a kilometre away from the fire. There was thick smoke plummeting from the pine forest that I could see in front of me. And there was also a number of helicopters dumping monsoon buckets on the fire, which is still not under control. And we understand it's spread to up to 3 hectares at the moment, and it could still be spreading as we speak.
Yeah, 3 hectares is a big amount of land. 2 things I noticed from looking at the picture as you beam in, Carla, from as close to the fire as you're allowed, I suspect. 1 is that it's windy, and 2, that the land behind you looks dry.
Yeah, no, the wind definitely played a big factor today with the firefighters especially. There were 70 firefighters in the end, and some also were sent as well, that were sent up here to battle this big fire. And there was a change in the wind shortly after they were alerted to the fire, and that meant that those firefighters had to be evacuated. But now it seems to be, has to have changed again a little bit, and is not so dangerous. But as you can see, it is still quite windy here, and it's still very much not under control. But the police did tell me before when I spoke to them about the number of houses, which you said before, 4 evacuated, 2 on Wrights Road just up here, and 2 on Quiet Rise, which isn't far as well, and also 6 others on notice. And the police also said that those families that had been evacuated had dealt with this sort of similar thing 3 or 4 years ago when there was another incident like this.
Carla Penman from near the blaze in Matakana, thank you. Carla, it's 5:28. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ. The father of a toddler who was allegedly kidnapped in Rotorua is warning parents to be careful with security at home. James Kiff says the disappearance of 18-month-old Elisaya from their home in the early hours of yesterday morning was not only terrifying and upsetting, but also a wake-up call. He was found a suburb away at around 8:30 yesterday morning. I spoke to James, who was a very proud dad, a short time ago. And just as we were about to speak, I heard a little voice in the background. That's not Elisaya I hear in the background, is it?
Yes.
How is he?
He's perfect, man. He's good stuff.
So obviously someone's been arrested, and we can't talk about that, and we can't talk about who it is and why they did it. But what happened? You just woke up to find him gone.
Yeah, we noticed that our hallway light was on, and that we always turn it off before going to bed, you know. And straight away, my partner Nikki, she said to me, straight away, for some reason, we've been robbed. And my first instinct, you know, was to go check the TV in the lounge room. I go out, no, the TV's still there and my wallet's still on the counter. And, no, surely not. And I don't know why, but we went and checked Elisaiah's room and he just wasn't there.
I can't imagine how terrifying that must be.
Yeah, it's indescribable, I guess. Just pure disbelief and panic, I guess.
So what did you do? Did you think that maybe a family member had taken him, or what did you think?
I wouldn't have never thought if one of my family members could have done anything like that. Not even any of my friends, because the people that I try and surround myself with are always good people, you know?
Yeah.
So for that sort of sense, I guess I had no idea on what or why, or it's just too much disbelief and panic, I guess.
So what did you do, James?
Well, obviously just had a bit of a panic search for him in the room, and then went back into the lounge and noticed that the window was wide open and someone obviously had broken in, you know. So, yes, after that it was just pure disbelief that someone had come in and had, you know, abducted him or taken him.
And James, this is a funny old thing, because I know you want to talk about this, but because someone is being charged and it's, you know, it's going to go before a court, we have to be careful what we say. So yes. Let's move to getting Elisaiah back. What was that like?
Well, it was just pure happiness though, but the shock and everything happened for us, you know. We pretty much went straight down to the police station for questioning and for saying our investigation and what's happened exactly, you know, and quite descriptive about it. So it's quite a long process to sit at the police station and tell them exactly what's happened, word for word on, you know, the day's event or the night, how the night has started. And for us, when we got him back, it was just, I was so knackered and so tired, but so relieved, you know.
Yeah, it must have been quite remarkable. What sort of state was he in?
Perfect happy state, because of maybe my mum or someone's just gone and picked him up for the night and dropped him back off, you know. He just looked happy and just looked like his normal self. So
I'm looking at a photo of him now, and I'm not just saying this because, you know, every parent likes to be flattered, but he looks like a beautiful boy.
Yeah, like I've told a few other people, you know, you don't try and float your own boat, but
no, you're allowed to as a dad, bro.
He's been pretty good for us. Like, a lot of people tell me how stressful being a parent is, but he definitely made my job that much easier.
Yeah.
Just such a placid, happy little kid that goes by his business by himself and is happy doing what he's doing, you know.
He's got a beautiful sparkle in his eyes. I'm delighted you got him back. In great Nick. You must be thoroughly bewildered and confused and exhausted and all of those things. But I think everyone listening will feel the same way, that, you know, we're truly delighted you got him home. Yeah,
definitely. And the things that I sort of want to sort of touch base on with a lot of the media and stuff about now is just more so the security of homes. You know, like, I've always been a big believer in having trust in people, you know. Like, I go to sleep usually with my door open, you know, or during the day the door's always open to people, so, because you just don't think things like that will happen to you. So for an event to happen like this to me is just absolutely blowing me away, I guess. It shouldn't happen the way it has, but I think it should be a little bit of a wake-up call for other parents or other people that can relate to what's just happened, you know.
No, I'm not asking you the identity of the accused, but yes. Did you know this person? Do you know the person who's been charged with this?
No, not at all.
No, so complete stranger to you and your family. A total stranger.
Total stranger, yes.
It's James Kiff, Elisaiah's dad, talking to us just before we came on here. What a proud dad he was, eh? 26 minutes to 6 coming up on Checkpoint. Gisborne will go without power again for 8 hours this Sunday while the lines are repaired. New Zealand rugby players are in line for a pay rise under a new 3-year deal announced today. Some big extra money has turned up. Later we're going to hear from David Seymour on drawing a line in the sand on emergency accommodation. How much is too much? Well, David Seymour's going to tell us. Nina's next with business, but first Katrina Batten with headlines.
4 houses have been evacuated and the occupants of 6 more are on notice as strong winds fan a fire in a pine forest at Matakana north of Auckland. 3 helicopter crews and 70 firefighters are battling the blaze. Wright Road is closed and homes along the road and on Quiet Rise are being evacuated. An ambulance is standing by because of the large number of beehives in the area and the risk of an allergic reaction from a sting. A West Auckland caravan park has been given nearly $500,000 of government money in 2 years through its residents' emergency housing grants. Western Park Village markets itself to beneficiaries and offers to help tenants get work and income to pay their bond and ongoing rent. Documents released to Checkpoint show in the 2 years to September, $472,000 was paid to residents for bonds, advanced rent and housing support at the park. Russia says its ally, the Syrian government, is now in full control of the city of Aleppo and all military action there has stopped. However, a deal to allow civilians to leave appears to have stalled, with reports Iranian militias are turning people back. The Immigration Minister is playing down findings that the exploitation of migrant workers is rife. More than 100 migrant workers interviewed for an Auckland University study told of working long hours and getting paid next to nothing. But the Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the study is only a small snapshot. A third National Party minister is quitting Parliament. Craig Foss today followed Hekia Parata and Sam Lotuinga in announcing he won't seek re-election as an MP next year. The Prime Minister, Bill English, will reveal his ministerial lineup on Sunday. The New Zealand Rugby's hopeful that its latest player agreement will encourage top All Blacks to remain here rather than head overseas. The total pool for player payments rises from $121 million to $176 million in the 3-year agreement. $25 million of that will be put aside to help retain All Blacks. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina. We're going to go to Aleppo next, but first, talking business with Nona Peltier. And Nona, you came down to see us because Nona checks in to discuss what she's going to discuss with us and said, by golly, Sky TV says it's going to miss its profit forecast for the year.
That's right.
Elaborate.
Well, what's happened is the subscriber numbers have fallen again. So in their full year to June 30, they had a flat number, and I guess the number was 852,679 subscribers.
Holy
so in
moly.
the year ended June 30.
So the 800 and how many?
852,679. That's every kind of subscriber, not
Right.
just the kind that subscribes to television. Could be one that watches online. It could be one that has the
Even
fan
so, in a
pass
country
or
of
whatever.
4.4 million, that sounds like a big market
It
share,
does,
right? Yep.
but you know how what the increase was only 1,000 from the year earlier.
Right, and
okay.
so revenue is flat, costs are...
Well, what happened was in the period since then to the end of November, the numbers have fallen. So that's not good. And as a result of that, so has the revenue. Meanwhile, the company has been busy securing the rights to the America's Cup in 2017. The Lions Tour, which of course will be of great interest to you, John.
It's true. So the Lions Rugby Tour. Now, you don't even really know what the Lions Tour is, do you?
I do. And also,
but rugby pays the bills for Sky.
that's right, and also
although
the
it's a big cost to them, right?
Yeah, and the PGA Golf. And so even though they expect to get some return from that over time, this financial year, no, they don't. So that means that they dropped their profit forecast by 5 to 7% over what they were forecasting. And so now they're expecting to make maybe perhaps 15% less than they made the year earlier. Not good. So what happened?
This is a tough business now, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
there are
it
so
really
many
is.
competitors in the market.
It really is. And of course, they're looking, their merger plans with Vodafone have been delayed until at least February 23rd when the Commerce Commission is going to come up with a decision. So yeah, it's just not they're not having a good time easily, no.
What did their share price do?
Well, as you would expect, it fell nearly 11%. That was, closed down to $4.28. Now, interestingly, our New Zealand dollar, just to change the subject a bit, I'm quite excited about this. Yes, the U.S. Federal Reserve tomorrow morning. Expected to raise interest rates. We've only been talking about this for a year, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to happen. And, well, of course, it's almost certain to happen. What the market will be interested in is what the Feds are thinking about in the year ahead with Donald Trump's policies and so on. We'll see what happens there. So then we can have something else to talk about for the next year, John. Meanwhile, our dollar is trading at 72.1 US cents, 96.2 Australian, and 57 pence.
So in advance of the Fed, the New Zealand dollar didn't move much at all, did it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
Thanks, Nona.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Nona Peltier, our Auckland business reporter. It's coming up to 20 to 6. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. The horrific 5-year siege of Aleppo is over, whatever that means, and Syrian forces are in control of the city. Under a ceasefire between pro-government forces and opposition rebels, rebel fighters and civilians who've been under constant bombardment are now being allowed, it's being reported, to leave the city. But the situation on the ground is being described as apocalyptic. There is no food or water, all hospitals are closed, many destroyed, and evidence has emerged of mass and systematic shootings of civilians. Mass murder, in other words. The BBC's Quentin Somerville reports.
This will be remembered as a crushing victory. The rebellion against President Assad in Aleppo is over. The final push, some 3 weeks of it, broke the east. Even the city's rescue squads, the British-backed White Helmets, have given up. They too will be evacuated from Aleppo. One rescuer tells us, yesterday we heard sounds of children under rubble crying and calling for help, but we couldn't help them because the regime forces have advanced and the bombardment was intense. The Syrian army had help here. Russian warplanes and foreign Shia fighters brought siege and collapse. They've been accused of war crimes, shooting women and children in the streets.
These reports are totally baseless and untrue. The Syrian Arab army would never do such things. In reality, the army is helping to secure the evacuation of civilians.
It's been 3 weeks of hell, and for most of it, Basil, an activist, has guided us through day and night. As news of the truce broke, we were again able to reach him deep inside eastern Aleppo, just before he left the city.
It's quiet here. People are on the streets, and nothing can describe how happy the people are. Ceasefire followed by evacuation from the destroyed city. It made the people who have suffered a lot. It made them happy.
The victory here is President Assad's. Aleppo is his now, but he didn't win it alone. He needed Russian and Iranian help. Finally, tonight, the city is quiet. But beyond here, much of Syria remains divided and still very far from peace.
It's Quentin Somerville. There's a stunning article about Aleppo in the New Yorker. It begins, Aleppo has been part of human history for some 5,000 years. Alexander the Great founded a settlement there. The city is cited in the book of Samuel in Psalm 60, and it goes on. So much has been lost. It's Syria's largest city, home to millions of people, and it was the country's financial and industrial centre, as well as being magic in the old part. It was dragged into the uprising against President Assad more than 4 years ago, and it's been the stage for a bitter and pitiless battle between Syria's forces and a confused collection of jihadist groups and groups fighting for a more democratic Syria. Not natural allies, but united against Assad. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have been caught up in the fighting. Thousands have died. Thousands have been injured as the West stood by and did little or nothing. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen looks at where to here for Aleppo, Syria and the West.
For the regime, this is the biggest single victory of the war, but it doesn't mean the war is over. Instead, it's changing shape and has much more killing left in it. None of this would have happened without the intervention of the Syrian state's allies, Russia, Iran and Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia. On top of Aleppo's historic citadel, a reporter for an Iranian TV station flew a Hezbollah flag next to Syria's. This, he claimed, is happening all over the city. Another part of the new Middle East is coming into focus. This is a victory for a coalition that opposes the West and its regional allies. In Serbia, the Russian foreign minister was contemptuous of American complaints. He said, "We're tired of hearing this whining from our American colleagues in the current administration, that we need to immediately halt military action." The acrimony continued in New York at the UN Security Council. This came from the Americans to Syria, Russia and Iran.
Are you truly incapable of shame? Is there literally nothing that can shame you? Is there no act of barbarism against civilians, no execution of a child that gets under your skin, that just creeps you out a little bit?
Deadlock in the Security Council for years paralysed hopes of a diplomatic solution to end the war. The Syrian ambassador showed what he said was proof that Syrian soldiers are helping, not hurting civilians in the areas they've captured in Aleppo. In London, in the Commons, the former Chancellor disavowed Britain's Syria policy, for which he admitted some responsibility.
The tragedy in Aleppo did not come out of a vacuum. It was created by a vacuum of Western leadership, of American leadership, British leadership.
When I was in Aleppo last in September, hand-wringing in the West was being matched with decisive military intervention by Russia and Iran. Influence in Syria means military force, and the West, chastened by the disasters in Iraq, chose not to use its power. The chemical attacks on rebel-held areas in Damascus in August 2013 had been a turning point. The Americans at the last minute cancelled punitive airstrikes against the Assad regime. The strikes wouldn't have ended the war, but they might have changed its course, perhaps even mortally wounding the regime. Western inaction left a vacuum, an opportunity for Russia that it took. Its intervention in Aleppo was decisive.
It's the BBC's Jeremy Bowen reporting, coming up to 14 minutes to 6. Let's go to Gisborne now. We'll go without power again for 8 hours this Sunday as crews finish repairing high-voltage lines struck by a top-dressing plane on Monday. While the lights are back on for now, the security of Gisborne's power supply is being questioned after the district endured more than 30 hours without electricity. Tim Graham reports.
Candles everywhere.
Trish Falloon reopened her shoe shop Footloose on Gladstone Road this morning after being shut for 2 days. She's hopeful her pre-Christmas takings haven't suffered too big a hit.
Today people will come back. There's lots of things to do. It's leading up to Christmas. I've probably got a Christmas list. I mean, a lot of Mondays there was a lot of people in town. A lot of country people came into town.
While she's happy to be trading again, Mrs. Falloon is worried about the security of the power supply into Gisborne, which she says needs investigating.
It's something that has to be looked at. I mean, imagine if it happened to Auckland for 2 days. Yeah, we are isolated, and I always tell everyone that we're a third island because we have got issues with getting certain things to here. I mean, it's a big, like the rail and everything else. We've got those hills that are a barrier.
Gisborne's electricity is supplied by one line into the district, which had its 2 circuits knocked out on Monday. Only one is now back up and running. Eastland is the local lines company. Its chief executive, Matt Todd, says building a new transmission line on an alternate route would be pricey.
The cost of building a new line, which would provide physical redundancy, is in the $75 to $100 million range. So if you spend that much, then that's going to be an additional cost per customer in the Gisborne region of about $400 per year. That's a lot for a community that doesn't have a lot of money and already has high electricity prices.
Matt Todd says the other option would be to generate more power in Gisborne itself. He says wood or gas-fired options could be considered. The Tairāwhiti Civil Defence Controller Patrick Willock suspects that's the way to go.
Without knowing the size of the generator that would be necessary and the cost of it, that's probably better because you have to know the terrain that this thing's coming over. Totally different from, for instance, the line going up through the Waikato into Auckland.
The Gisborne Mayor Meng Foon won't be drawn on his preference for investment in lines or generation. He says it's better for people to be self-reliant.
Sure, I think that's quite a responsible thing to do because we live in a district where we're generally self-reliant, and I think that's a responsible thing to actually tell our community, look, be aware that these things do happen, be prepared.
Local lines companies don't fall under the Electricity Authority's jurisdiction, but the Commerce Commission. It says it doesn't dictate the asset base of electricity distribution businesses. The national grid operator, Transpower, says it's very unusual for 2 circuits supplying an area to be knocked out simultaneously and questions the need for another line into Gisborne given the cost. Meanwhile, air crash investigators have returned to the scene of Monday's accident northeast of Wairoa. There have been no progress updates as the terrain is described as inhospitable and communication into the area is difficult. For Checkpoint, ko Tim Graham tēnei.
From Gisborne to Wellington, the ministerial cards keep falling as Prime Minister Bill English prepares to reshuffle his cabinet deck. Craig Foss is the second minister in as many days to announce he will quit and not seek re-election next year as Parliament rises for the year. Looking at all of this is our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Yesterday it was Cabinet Minister and Maunga Kia MP Sam Lotuinga. Today it was the Minister of Small Business, Statistics and Veterans Affairs and MP for Tukituki, Craig Foss. He's a minister outside of Cabinet, but was another who could have found himself on the demotion list. Mr Foss says he received no such message from either John Key or the new Prime Minister, Bill English.
Oh no, not at all. Just, with Prime Minister Key moving on, other resignations, and I found myself thinking about, what's it all mean for me and what do I want to do, what do I feel best about doing, and mine kept drifting to home, so I decided no, time for me to go.
John Key has already gone to Hawaii, but for the politicians who haven't yet fled, Parliament held the last question time for 2016 this afternoon. The Labour leader Andrew Little adopted a Christmas theme in this question to the Prime Minister Bill English that involved a dig at his friend Housing Minister Nick Smith, another MP viewed as vulnerable in the Cabinet reshuffle.
Given he now has 4 ambitious amigos, 3 resigning ministers, 2 brooding rivals, who's going to rescue Nick Smith from the pear tree?
Well, Mr Speaker, the basic difference is this. We have 59 members of Parliament. And that is a great deal more than that member has. And it doesn't matter what presents he gets for Christmas, that's basically not going to change.
Mr Little then referred to one of Mr English's former leadership contenders.
Will Judith Collins finally get more police in her stocking this year? Or is it a merrier Christmas for the burglars who now have a 95% chance of just getting away with it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm sure that the Minister of Police will be getting a lovely Christmas card from the Commissioner of Police.
Andrew Little's deputy, Annette King, then singled out Mr English's other thwarted leadership rival, asking Jonathan Coleman about his approach if he keeps the health portfolio.
Will he stop being a gringe and a grouch of Parliament? Will he lighten up instead of lighting up? And will he spread a little bit of joy around for those who've been waiting all year for some services from the health system?
Well, the Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
The problem for the Labour Party is they have absolutely no one else who could do the health portfolio, and that's why Mrs King is still stuck there 30 years after first assuming it.
The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters was not going to miss out on the action.
How will a bunch of egregious self-serving ambitious careerists who have been given the Don't Come to Caucus Tuesday message and certain tiresomely useless cabinet ministers get on this Christmas when they know they've been given the boot?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, given it's a season of goodwill and the member has seen many Christmases, I must say he is a very well-dressed, egregious, self-serving careerist.
Parliamentary business is not yet finished for the year, however. Andrew Little will announce a small reshuffle of the Labour caucus on Friday, and Bill English will reveal his new ministerial lineup on Sunday. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
In a year marred by some scandal, New Zealand rugby players are in line for a pay rise under a new 3-year deal announced today, which will see the total pool for player salaries increased by $70 million. New Zealand Rugby says $15 million will be held back for allocation in future years, but the deal will see most rugby and sevens players $5,000 better off. Matt Chatterton breaks down the details.
The $55 million boost in the player pool is due to New Zealand Rugby's new contracts with its major sponsors, broadcast rights and the upcoming British and Irish Lions tour next year. The money will be spread out from All Black level all the way down to the provincial and development levels, including the sevens. An extra $8 million will also be put aside to help retain New Zealand's best players, the All Blacks. The maximum retainer for Super Rugby players will increase by $5,000 to $195,000, with the minimum retainer increasing to $75,000. Meanwhile, the minimum retainer for women's sevens players is now higher than men's, $45,000 compared to $40,000. New Zealand Players Association boss Rob Nicholl says this agreement will hopefully entice players to stay in New Zealand rather than chase big dollars overseas.
It's about forcing a situation of really strong communication, understanding the player or the coach you're looking to retain, what they want to achieve out of their career, their life, their family, all that side of things, and then tailoring the offer to give yourself a really best opportunity of retaining them, or at the very least make it really, really hard for them to go.
And New Zealand Rugby General Manager Neil Sorensen agrees. He says player retention is the number one priority for New Zealand Rugby.
And we've all seen how hard it is to retain the likes of our top 40, 50 or top 150 players. It's really hard. We've got Ben Smith, Israel Dagg and Aaron Cruden right now. We're looking to make a play to keep those guys in this country. So this collective deal goes some way to helping us.
As part of the agreement, new player conduct education programs will be implemented following several high-profile off-field incidents involving rugby players during the year. A new illicit drug education program has also been included. Sorensen says New Zealand Rugby has had a horror year involving scandals and believes these new protocols will help prevent future faux pas.
We need to ensure that our young men and women are fully supported and well educated. We do put our players under a lot of pressure. You and I can go into a cafe, no one would look sideways at us. You know, a young Jordan Barrett goes into a cafe now, whole cafe is saying that's Jordan Barrett over there. That, and also with the money they earn, puts pressure on that young man or young woman. Now we have a moral obligation to make sure that they can deal with that pressure.
Sorensen says regardless of how much money is put into the initiatives, a small group of players will still make mistakes. For Checkpoint, Ko Matt Chatterton Tine.
Sighs of relief from Hanma Springs businesses today after the government announced a $350,000 post-quake package to help boost tourism in Hurunui. Economic Development Minister Stephen Joyce says Hanma Springs has not experienced significant structural damage but has suffered a sharp downturn in tourist activity. Maya Burry reports.
Stephen Joyce says the government will provide up to $250,000 of marketing support to help attract Cantabrians and other tourists to the area. He says a further $100,000 will help regional tourism organisations employ extra staff for up to 6 months. Hanma Springs Thermal Pools and Spa General Manager Graham Abbott says they've had a drop in visitors since the quakes because people believe the North Canterbury town is quake damaged when it isn't.
Take a weekend like last weekend, we'd expect to have 3,000 people through for the weekend, and we ended up with just over 2,400. So, yeah, there's a 30% drop. And if a 20% drop for the whole of Hurunui region is over an annual base is $50 million. So, it's a lot of money.
Mr Abbott says locals are relieved their appeal for help has been heard.
We went to the Minister 3 weeks ago with a fairly detailed plan as to what we would do in terms of investing that money wisely to get the levels right. Yes, because there's been a downturn in business, somewhere between 30 and 40% is still being experienced in the region. So we need to turn that cycle around, if you like.
Christian Chester is the chairman of the Hanma Springs Business Association and the manager of the adventure tourism company Hanma Springs Attractions. He says his business is down about 15%, but the support package should help ease some of the pain.
We're obviously very appreciative of government for stepping in and helping out. It's, sends tingles because it just means that we can get it back on track.
Mr Chester says it's crucial the summer season goes well.
So a lot of these companies will run at a loss through majority of the year, and then the structure is they'll basically pull it all back over those summer months. So if we don't pull it back, it's potentially some of these businesses tipping over.
The government has already extended a Kaikoura business support package to some businesses in Hurunui, but Stephen Joyce says this new initiative will provide a different kind of relief.
Well, we were just concerned that there are some businesses that have been very affected by the tourism downturn, which is just people not knowing that Hanma is fine and okay to go. So a combination of looking after a few of those businesses and also promoting tourism in the district will help ensure that they recover as quickly as possible.
Meanwhile, relief is also in sight for Springs Junction. The government has today announced $200,000 in funding for public restroom facilities for the area. That's because so many people are using the alternative Picton to Christchurch route, the existing facilities are being swamped. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
Just as we come up to the news at 6, a German tourist is in hospital after being attacked by a seal in the Abel Tasman National Park. The 18-year-old was taking a swim at Separation Point this afternoon when a seal took exception to his presence and repeatedly bit him on both of his lower legs. Ouch. Conan Young spoke to Carl Babe, one of the paramedics who helped him.
So he's been in the water swimming, and unfortunately he's sort of strayed into some fairly territorial seals who've objected to his presence, and they've seen him off.
Right, and was he able to say how long this went on for?
No, we didn't get that detail off him. I wouldn't say he was savaged for a prolonged period. He's been given a fairly good bite on both legs, but I think it would have been over and done with pretty quickly. He's legged it for sure and managed to drag himself out on the rocks and call for help. Whether it was a number of them or one, I'm not sure, but he's been bitten in the water, and he's been given some assistance by other people in the area and the local dock ranger.
There's something beautifully deadpan about that description of him being seen off. Very New Zealand. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. Here's the...
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A large pine forest fire at Matakana, north of Auckland, has been brought under control. 3 helicopters and 75 fighters have been battling the fire on Wright Road, northeast of Warkworth. 4 houses were evacuated and the occupants of 6 more were put on notice as strong winds fanned the flames. RNZ News reporter Carla Penman told Checkpoint what she could see from a half a kilometre away.
There was thick smoke plummeting from the pine forest that I could see in front of me, and there was also a number of helicopters dumping monsoon buckets on the fire.
Carla Penman. The fire service says the fire is now under control, although not yet contained. A West Auckland caravan park has been given nearly $500,000 of government money in 2 years through its residents' emergency housing grants. Documents released to Checkpoint show in the 2 years to September, $472,000 was paid to Western Park Village residents for bond, advance rent and housing support at the park. Monte Cecilia Housing Trust has a social worker based there, and its chief executive officer, Bernie Smith, says the park's income is even more than the documents show.
Around 300 people living in that situation. I've heard $1 million plus per year. But I think there's a wait list for people to get in there.
Bernie Smith. Western Park Village's owners have not responded to requests for comment. The Gisborne Lines company Eastland says it could cost up to $100 million to put a second electricity transmission line into the district. Power was cut to thousands of people for more than 30 hours when a top-dressing plane struck high-voltage lines on Monday morning. There'll be a controlled blackout for 8 hours on Sunday to enable final repair of the lines. Eastland says the idea of building a new line on an alternate route has been considered before. Its chief executive, Matt Todd, says the company is happy to revisit the idea if the community wants it, but it would be expensive.
The cost of building a new line is in the $75 to $100 million range. So if you spend that much, then that's going to be an additional cost per customer in the Gisborne region of about $400 per year. That's a lot for a community that doesn't have a lot of money and already has high electricity prices.
Matt Todd. Meanwhile, investigators are preparing to remove the wreckage of the plane. The crash killed Farmers Air pilot George Anderson and a loader who hasn't yet been publicly named. The Civil Aviation Authority says the burnt-out wreckage is in inhospitable terrain northeast of Wairoa. It says its investigators at the site plan to have the wreck airlifted to Gisborne tomorrow for close examination. An 11-year-old girl is the first confirmed fatality from the recent series of earthquakes in Solomon Islands. Disaster teams are only now reaching isolated parts of the Guadalcanal, Malaita and Makera and Ulawa provinces. The girl died when a building collapsed on top of her in Guadalcanal. The Labour Party says the decision to allow private insurers to manage claims arising from the Kaikoura earthquake is an admission the process in Canterbury was mismanaged. The Earthquake Commission and private insurers have agreed that private insurers will act as the Commission's agent and manage all claims. Labour's Canterbury spokesperson Megan Woods says the government hasn't learned at all it could from Canterbury, and she believes it's rushed into a new process.
We all know that there was a problem with scoping. We know there was a problem with the management of claims, but I'm not convinced this isn't just the government contracting out of its responsibilities to the people of New Zealand.
Megan Woods says she also wants to know how the potential conflict of interest will be managed, with the insurance industry deciding whether it or EQC is liable for repairs. People in Wellington will be able to travel from one end of Molesworth Street to the other from tomorrow for the first time since the day after the November 14th quake. Part of the street has been closed because of a cordon in place around the building at number 61, which is being demolished in stages. The cordon will be reduced from 7 tomorrow morning, opening one lane of Molesworth Street for cars and pedestrians. It's 6:04. In sport, and New Zealand Rugby is hopeful its latest player agreement will encourage top All Blacks to remain here rather than head overseas. Under the 3-year deal signed with the Players Association, the total pool for player payments goes up from $121 million to $176 million. $25 million or $8 million more than the last time will be put aside to help retain All Blacks, which the New Zealand Rugby General Manager Neil Sorensen says is the top priority.
We've all seen how hard it is to retain the likes of our top 40, 50 or top 150 players. It's really hard. We've got Ben Smith, Israel Dagg and Aaron Cruden right now. We're looking to make a play to keep those guys in this country. So this collective deal goes some way to helping us.
Neil Sorensen. Paralympics New Zealand is still owed almost $40,000 by the organisers of the Rio Paralympics. The money is owed for travel grants that were part of the contractual agreement to host the Olympics and Paralympics. All up, the International Paralympics Committee is owed $5 million. Defenders Kayla Cullen, Phoenix Karaka and Storm Purvis will miss the Silver Ferns netball quad series in South Africa and England next month through injury. They've been left out of the 12-strong squad, which includes 2 newcomers, defender Kelly Jury and mid-quarter Sam Sinclair. Coach Janine Southby says they should be fit in time for the new domestic ANZ Premiership starting in February. That's the news.
Under siege.
These are the most terrifying times humanity see, if there is anything called humanity.
Underground.
When you have the first crew lining up to go back and I'm offering to go, I've read those reports and I trust them rather than their bureaucracy.
Under pressure.
Quite a few of us here in Gisborne, we haven't had a shower, a hot shower anyway, for the last 2 days.
On top of all the major stories, Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espin are weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, how legislation to boost affordable housing might be putting homes at risk from sea level rise. And after 10, Cenk Uygur, political activist, founder and host of YouTube's most popular news site, The Young Turks. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato and Bay of Plenty. A few showers in Bay of Plenty until evening, otherwise mainly fine. However, showers in Waikato tomorrow afternoon and elsewhere during the evening. Waitomo to Wellington and Wairarapa, including the central high country. Remaining showers clearing this afternoon. Rain tomorrow, briefly heavy with northwest gales in exposed places, clearing later. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay becoming fine this afternoon, patchy rain developing tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, cloudy periods, a few showers, mainly tomorrow morning, northwest gales in exposed places for a time. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain spreading north, followed by showers, some thundery tomorrow with hail and isolated squally thunderstorms from central Westland southwards. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some heavy tomorrow with hail and isolated squally thunderstorms in the south. Northwest gales, in exposed places easing tonight. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and periods of rain tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
When Katrina said I know, you were reacting to my incredulous face. That is crap weather for early summer.
Hail! Awful.
Thanks, Katrina Batten. Last night we brought you the story of Tuani Murray, who's been living in motels with her family since May whilst she waits for a Housing New Zealand house. In May, Tuaini was paying $1,200 per week for a room in Takanini. She's currently staying at a hotel in Papatoetoe, where Winds are paying $2,300 per week for a room with an oven that doesn't work. Tomorrow, Winds will move her to a hotel in Otahuhu, where they will pay $1,700 a week. So Tuaini started by getting the money from Winds but having to repay it. Now Winds is paying the totality of her emergency accommodation. Now, Waina Emery watched our story on Facebook last night. She used to work for Housing New Zealand and is angry state houses are lying empty while Winds is forced to pay exorbitant rates for hotel rooms for emergency accommodation for people who would otherwise be homeless. Here's our reporter, Zach Fleming.
The families who used to live in these homes on Manurewa's Wordsworth Street were kicked out by Housing New Zealand to make way for redevelopment. But that was, in some cases, 9 months ago.
Once they left, no one's been back to do anything to the properties. And it's just empty and bare. We've had people come around to the houses, taking scrap metal or finding things to scrap, dumping rubbish. It's just starting to look really ugly.
Waina Emery used to work for Housing New Zealand. She says she can't understand why they were kicked out before development was due to start.
Just between here and the end of the road, about 9. That's quite a few. There's 4 on this side and 5 on this side.
And they've been empty for how long?
Oh, quite a few months. It's been going on since the beginning of this year, about March, and it's still, here it is December, and one would have thought that people could live in the homes.
How does it make you feel seeing this happen, knowing when you used to work with people who were in such need?
It's sad because you really wonder where they've gone to and how they're doing and where the children, and it seems that they've been moved out and you hope that they've been moved to another house and they've got a house to live in.
Fina Leatua is one of those people who were forced to leave. She lived there for 5 years but was fortunately given a new home just 1 street over.
Shouldn't be empty, because that's what we were saying. We thought that they would have started building houses already, because there's so many people that need houses to stay in, and it's those houses now are being broken into, people drinking in them. It's not safe, especially the young ones that go there, because our next door neighbours were telling us that people have been stealing stuff as well from their houses. They've been making holes and stuff in the walls and everything. Rats, and the grass has grown up so high. Did you see it?
Jacinda says crime has gone up since the homes have been empty. How does this make you feel knowing across the road there are these empty houses that are just nothing's happening?
It's really sad. I would love people to move into these houses. It's a waste. We've got quite a few. We've even got neighbours next to us that have moved out, and that house over there's been empty since March of this year. That's a while. A family could have moved into that home. It's pretty sad. And then look at the state it's in now for the rubbish that people have just dumped there. It's pretty disgusting. I'm sure a family would have loved to move into a home and make it a home for their family.
And she's been told she would have to leave Wordsworth eventually too.
They told us last year.
And you have no idea what's happening?
No, we still have no idea of what's happening. We haven't seen any plan or anything to show us what's happening, or they've told us that there's going to be redevelopment in the area.
And you don't even know what time that's going to happen, or what time you're going to have to leave?
They just gave us a month. They told us that we'll be out. They're going to get us out of our house between February and March of next year.
We asked Housing New Zealand when development is due to start. They're yet to reply. Waina says nobody should have been kicked out until development was primed and ready to begin.
Yeah, motels and maraes are okay, very temporary, but what a waste. These homes are here, they need furnishing, they need looking after, and the families need the homes. You'd think they'd connect to put them together.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
12 minutes past 6, still no response from Housing New Zealand about that story. Daryl Evans, well known to our listeners, of course, is from the Mangere Budgeting Service in Auckland.
There are many motels that I have visited that are completely and utterly overpriced. I think a lot of the motels I've been into are beggars' belief. They're shoddy, they're old-fashioned, and they're rough. And some people would say, well, that would suit the people staying there. I don't accept that. You know, the reality is, if MSD are paying $3,000 a week, you could do 2 things. One, you could be paying somebody's mortgage, which they would own long term. And number 2, you've only got to look at Trade Me, and especially in South Auckland, For $600 a week, you could rent a very nice 4-bedroom house in Mangere, Otara, in some of the South Auckland communities. Surely that is a far better option. And the reality is you'd be able to house 4 or 5 families for the equivalent of putting one family in a motel at $3,000 a week. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
Daryl Evans, he was talking about the cost of emergency accommodation, the sort of stuff that we've been looking at. $2,300 is the highest weekly sum we've seen in the absence of Housing New Zealand availability. Now, Checkpoint phoned more than 20 motels around Auckland this afternoon. And more than half of them say they simply won't take WINS clients, full stop, emergency housing. They say they're fed up with having rooms trashed, damage done and ending up out of pocket if they do so. The ACT leader and Epsom MP David Seymour says motel owners in his electorate have complained to him about the state they find their rooms in after they have been let to WINS clients. Mr Seymour says the housing shortage can't be solved with a blank cheque.
The number one issue is the underperforming housing market. If we were producing houses at the same rate that we know New Zealand can spit them out, at 13 houses per capita or per 1,000 people, as we did in the 1970s, then we would have far fewer people facing a shortage of housing and a lot of the poverty that is related to it. But I also think that there's a separate issue here, which is that some of the people in this situation because they have abused home after home and landlord after landlord and ended up in a situation where only a small number of very hardy moteliers, and as you say, that run not especially appealing establishments, will take them. And I just wonder if the obligation of the taxpayer and fellow citizens is infinite, or if we should actually be saying, look, this is what we will offer. It's up to you to sort it out and find someone that will accommodate you for this rate. And that rate will inevitably be significantly higher than what the market is because you acknowledge you're dealing with very difficult people. But I don't think that it should be a blank cheque or that it should be infinite because when you do that, you actually just incentivise more of the irresponsibility and bad behaviour, frankly, that's got us to the state of $2,300 a week.
And if that can't be made to work for whatever reason, then you have people sleeping in cars, don't you?
Well, that's inevitably what happens to some people in any society. And I'm just raising the question, how much money that we could be spending on a whole lot of other causes in health and education, but also in infrastructure and things that people need, should we give up for a minority of people who can't basically play by the rules that everybody else plays by. And I know that the popular thing as a politician is to say, oh, yes, of course, blank cheque will do as much as is necessary to look after everybody, but at some point you have to draw a line. And what you might do is say, look, we can understand $500 a week in particularly bad cases in a tight market in Auckland with people with special needs. We can understand $1,000, maybe even $1,500 a week. Maybe we can spend $78,000 a year of taxpayer money on housing one family with particular needs. But $2,300 a year, I mean, that is basically wiping out around about 5 or 6 working taxpayers' contribution as soon as they pay their money in through PAYE. It's gone out to this cause, and I don't think that's acceptable.
Do you have specific examples of the sorts of things you're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've spoken to people in the Epsom electorate who have said to me, I run a motel. We got into this business because we want to make money, but also out of a sense of public spiritedness and helping people who are out of luck or down on their luck. And unfortunately, the kinds of things we've had to put up with, the state in which we've found some of our rooms has made it almost impossible to stay in the business, and we've had to start managing which contracts we take in order that we don't just get all our rooms trashed and lose money on the proceeds.
David Seymour, who is the ACT leader and the Epsom MP, just received a statement from Massey University, Massey University Chancellor Chris Kelly has today advised the university that he intends to step down from his position effective immediately. Mr Kelly said his decision follows media coverage of his comments concerning the Massey University veterinary program that he has subsequently apologised for. Having had time to carefully consider the views of many staff, students and stakeholders, I believe it is in the interests of the university that I step aside, he said. Those comments, of course, were about female veterinarians and yep, he stepped aside. US President-elect Donald Trump has confirmed the head of the world's largest energy company, ExxonMobil, is his choice, for US Secretary of State. Mr Trump has praised Rex Tillerson as being among the most accomplished business leaders and international deal makers in the world. The new Secretary of State is known to have a good relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, alarming both Democrats and some Republicans. The nomination still needs Senate approval. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports.
In Trump Tower today, it was as if Aleppo didn't exist. Instead, a brief cameo from the president-elect and Kanye West, one of America's most recognisable globe-trotting celebrities.
Life. We discussed it.
But in finally choosing his globe-trotting chief diplomat, Donald Trump has plumped for a much less familiar figure. His choice is Rex Tillerson, a Texan oil man, a staunch conservative, and the chairman of ExxonMobil, one of the world's largest companies. In that global role, he's conducted something of a corporate foreign policy and cut major deals with the Russians. Vladimir Putin rewarded him with the Russian Order of Friendship, the country's highest honour for a foreigner. But champagne at the Kremlin isn't a problem for Donald Trump. It's a plus.
He knows many of the players, and he knows them well. He does massive deals in Russia. He does massive deals for the company, not for himself, for the company.
The billionaire turned the selection process into a high-stakes version of Celebrity Apprentice, and household names like Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney were all paraded before the cameras. But in the end, he opted for a fellow deal-maker, even though Tillerson would become the first Secretary of State without government or military experience. For an untested team, there's no shortage of global problems. Battling the group calling itself Islamic State, and the wider war in Syria. Tensions with China, especially over trade, and now perhaps Taiwan. The threat from North Korea's nuclear weapons, and the nuclear deal with Iran, which Donald Trump wants to renegotiate. And then there's the aim of resetting relations with America's longtime adversary.
I have a very close relationship with him. I don't agree with everything he's doing.
Some senior Republicans are asking if that relationship is too cosy, especially after he opposed sanctions against Moscow. Another key appointment today, the former Texan Governor Rick Perry as Energy Secretary. The one-time presidential candidate will take charge of a department he once vowed to abolish and once famously forgot.
The third agency of government, I would do away with the education, commerce, and let's see, I can't. The third one I can't, sorry. Oops.
The appointment of so many figures with ties to Russia seems to signal one of the biggest shifts in US foreign policy since Richard Nixon went to China in the early 1970s. That was intended to isolate the Soviet Union. This seems to be the strategy in reverse, to isolate Beijing.
The BBC's Nick Bryant reporting. They're covered in 140,000 square metres of paint. They have 4,000 lights and 400 kilometres of cabling and wiring. The two longest road tunnels in the country, part of Auckland's $1.4 billion Waterview connection, are getting the finishing touches before they open in 4 months. Sharon Brett Kelly went for a drive through them and finds out what it would be like if there was a crash and a fire.
That's the sound of an emergency in the tunnel. 90 litres of water per second pours out of nozzles in the tunnel roof. Today it's being turned on for the media. In a real fire, there would be 3 times as much water.
So if there was an emergency in the tunnel, say 2 vehicles crashed into each other and a fire started, what would happen is that that would set off all the sensors in the tunnel, and automatically the tunnel would work out what area the fire is at and would turn on the deluge system, which is what we've just seen here.
Brett Glidden, the Transport Agency's Auckland Highway Manager, explains what would happen in a real emergency as the torrent floods the road and jet fans blast air through the tunnel.
At the same time, the fire service would be alerted and the emergency crews would be arriving at the tunnel, and we would be able to shut the tunnel and get everyone out of this tunnel into the tunnel next door through the cross passages, and the emergency crews could enter.
The 2.4 kilometre long twin tunnels are part of the Waterview connection, the country's largest ever roading project. It also includes a giant interchange at Great North Road to connect the northwestern and southwestern motorways. Brett Glidden calls it a one-in-a-lifetime project.
It is an engineering masterpiece, and it's been very, very tricky to build. It's the 10th biggest bored tunnel, road tunnel in the world, and when you do tunnelling, it is a very risky type of construction technique, and to do it without any issue and safely as we have here is just a fantastic achievement.
Tunnelling first began 3 years ago, digging down more than 40 metres below ground. The famous tunnel boring machine called Alice, one of the largest of its kind in the world, pulled out 800,000 cubic metres of spoil, enough to fill 320 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Engineer and project manager Ian Simmons says turning Alice around halfway through to start on the second tunnel was one of the big challenges.
We had a tunnelling machine that weighed 3,500 tonnes that we had to turn around in a box where we only had something like 150 millimetres of clearance. Some of the other challenges we've got across the project, we have a very beautiful aesthetic footbridge in the south here, and that's a very complex structure in the way it's made in terms of the pre-stressed concrete, in terms of the suspension of the deck. Up in the north, the challenges up there are really around the ramps. Instead of having to get a crane in to lift them and close the motorway, we did it with a gantry that actually picked the beam up and then travelled forward over the gap and dropped the beams down.
Ian Simmons says the people have made the project special.
We've had more than 10,000 people inducted onto this project. There's well over 10 million man-hours have been worked on this project. We meet politicians, we meet local community stakeholders, councillors, and it's great just to mix with a huge range of people.
At peak time, 15,000 vehicles will travel on the 6 lanes of the 2 tunnels. The statistics might be world beaters, but it will take just 2 minutes to drive through the tunnels at top speed of 80 kilometres. Mō te hotaka o te ahiahi ko Sharon Brett Kelly, aho.
6:25. A new report has found the exploitation of migrant workers is rife in New Zealand, with some reportedly being violently threatened by employers or even propositioned for sex. More than 100 mostly temporary migrant workers were interviewed over 2 years for the Auckland University study, and they recounted working long hours and getting paid next to nothing in some cases. However, the Immigration Minister is dismissing the seriousness of the problem. Here's our employment reporter, Max Toll.
These are people who spoke to researchers anonymously, people who moved to New Zealand on temporary visas, dreaming of a better life. The report says what they got instead was broken promises.
I went to IRD, I went to the Labour Department, I went to immigration, everywhere to complain about these guys, but no one is doing anything.
Another worker was threatened by his employer, who warned him never to complain.
Stand against me, nobody's going to find your dead body in New Zealand.
Here's what a migrant was told after asking why he had to pay some of his wages back to his boss.
You came here for a job, it is not free.
The Immigration Minister, Michael Woodhouse, distanced himself from the study today, saying it was unscientific and showed only a small snapshot.
We have been aware of isolated incidents of migrant exploitation and the sorts of things that the report has highlighted. We've been acting on it, we've changed the law, we've beefed resources. This adds to our knowledge, but I don't think it's anything new.
So are you confident that the situation for migrant workers in New Zealand has been improving?
Certainly relative to the number of people who are on migrant visas, I don't think it's getting worse. But I wouldn't be naive enough to think that this isn't occurring, and indeed that's what the report has highlighted.
Mr Woodhouse says he urges people in migrant communities to speak up if they have a problem, without worrying they'll have to leave New Zealand if they do. Anu Koloti of the Migrant Workers Association says the message isn't getting through.
They don't want to risk or jeopardise their work visa, which could possibly or potentially lead to permanent residence. That's one of the biggest reasons why they all just stay quiet and put up with whatever comes their way. A lot of these people are having to pay their employers, so they are buying jobs or they are buying visas.
The report highlights the horticulture, hospitality and construction sectors as the worst culprits, but a spokesperson for the Etu Union, Joe Gallagher, says exploitation is far more widespread.
I cover the telecommunications sector, and I am reviewing some documents in a moment, and one of them, it's got a restraint of trade that says if you leave us, you can't work for another employer for 3 years in that industry, and that's just absolutely disgraceful. disgraceful.
The report's key recommendation is a new government office be set up to combat human trafficking and labour exploitation. Anu Kolotti wants a full-blown inquiry.
Immigration New Zealand officers were not thoroughly checking some of the financial documents that agents are submitting on behalf of these students without the knowledge of the students. So I would say Immigration New Zealand needs to tighten up its own policies and procedures and how they are implemented.
Quite by chance, the Labour Inspectorate today announced it had successfully brought a case against a vegetable farm for exploiting 75 workers. It said Bindi Enterprises took advantage of vulnerable migrants who didn't know their rights, and the Bombay Hills business has been ordered to pay more than $400,000. For Checkpoint, Cormac's Toll Tene.
Lots of feedback tonight. This is a long email from Richard, and we're going to read it out. Throughout the winter months of this year, when Tapuia Marae looked after homeless families in Auckland, and night after night Checkpoint carried stories highlighting the many issues facing the homeless, Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett was unavailable for interview or comment. However, she or someone in her office did find time, Richard says, to smear the Marae chairman, Huri Moana Dennis, a police inspector, by informing the media he was under a police investigation. Nothing has changed, said Richard. Again, a family who is struggling to find a home for themselves and a handicapped child have been smeared by a department who, in response to a Checkpoint query, released an unequivocal statement that the family had been evicted from accommodation on a number of occasions. This statement was picked up not only by Checkpoint but was also repeated on radio and TV news last night. Today, the department have grudgingly admitted that in a rush to answer Checkpoint's questions, they made an error. In fact, their words were the result of their speed was misleading, and they did apologise for that. However, as Richard says, too late for the family. I think thousands would have heard the story and not the retraction. Once again, Paula Bennett is not available for an interview or comment. This is a marked contrast to how available she was last week as she scrambled for the position of Deputy Prime Minister during one of the interviews. Whilst chasing that position, she told an interviewer how she really loved people. Apparently that love is not enough to front on your program when the difficult questions need to be answered. Perhaps, John, you should make yourself unavailable the next time Mrs Bennett wants to spin a story, but then that would be news media being arrogant, wouldn't it? That's from Richard, ending our program for tonight.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Massey University's Chancellor Chris Kelly has stepped down following controversial comments about female vets. Military action is said to be over in Aleppo and a deal reached with rebel fighters to leave. A fire in 3 hectares of pines at Matakana, north of Auckland, which caused the evacuation of 4 homes, has been controlled. A West Auckland caravan park has been given nearly $500,000 of government money in 2 years through its residents' emergency housing grants. And the Gisborne Lines company Eastland says it could cost up to $100 million to put a second electricity transmission line into the district. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Inside Out, a bit of Thelonious Monk, some Billie Holiday, some music from Aotearoa with Tessa Quayle, Susan de Jong and Nick Granville,